The black garbage bag wasn't supposed to move. Sarah Winter's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as she slammed the brakes, her old Chevy skidding across sun-baked asphalt. The tires screamed in protest. The Virginia sunset cast long shadows across the deserted country road, painting everything in blood-orange light. There it was again, the bag dragging itself across the road like some nightmarish creature. "Sweet Jesus," Sarah whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. She should drive on, call someone. Anyone. Instead, she stepped out, gravel crunching beneath her boots. The bag convulsed. A low whimper emerged. Sarah crept closer, fishing her phone from her pocket. The flashlight beam revealed a horrific sight: matted fur, protruding ribs, and desperate eyes staring back from inside the torn plastic. A German shepherd, bound with zip ties, muzzle sealed with duct tape. Something ancient and terrible settled in Sarah's stomach. Those eyes weren't just pleading, they were trying to tell her something. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Sarah Winters had never planned to stop in Milridge, Virginia, at 46. The veterinarian was supposed to be heading to Lake Sherwood for a month-long retreat doctor's orders after the accident that took her only son, Jason, 6 months ago. The grief counselor called it finding space to breathe. Sarah called it running away. The setting sun painted the Blue Ridge foothills in amber hues as Sarah crouched beside the suffering animal. 20 years of veterinary practice hadn't hardened her to animal suffering, but this was deliberate cruelty beyond comprehension. The German shepherd's coat, once likely lustrous black and tan, hung in dirty patches around a frame so emaciated each rib stood in stark relief. Despite his condition, the dog's amber eyes held surprising clarity. "Easy there, big fella," she whispered, careful not to make sudden movements. "I'm going to help you." The dog's collar, worn but intact, carried a simple tag: Duke. If found, call 557214092. Someone had owned this dog, perhaps loved him before whatever nightmare had brought him to this country road in a garbage bag. 40 miles away, in a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Milridge, Robert Fletcher sat alone at his kitchen table. At 58, the former detective's face carried the weathered lines of a man who'd aged decades in just 2 years. The wall calendar remained fixed on June 2023, the month his 10-year-old daughter Lily and her beloved German shepherd disappeared during a school field trip to Blackwater Falls. The investigation room, once his home office, remained exactly as it had been when the sheriff's department officially declared the case cold. Maps covered the walls, red strings connecting locations, witness statements, and dead-end leads. Caroline had called it his madness room before she filed for divorce last year. The department had suggested early retirement after he'd punched a suspect during questioning. None of it mattered without Lily. Robert's phone rarely rang anymore. Friends had stopped checking in months ago, tired of one-word answers and declined invitations. So when the ancient Nokia buzzed against the worn oak table, he nearly knocked over his cold coffee reaching for it. The unfamiliar voice on the other end spoke words he'd stopped hoping to hear. "I think I've found your dog, Duke. I've found—" Sarah worked methodically, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She cut through the zip ties binding the dog's legs with trauma shears from her roadside emergency kit, speaking in soft, even tones as she worked. "I'm going to help you, big guy. Just stay still for me." The German Shepherd remained unnaturally calm as she carefully peeled away the duct tape from his muzzle, revealing raw skin underneath. His breath came in shallow pants, dehydration evident in his sunken eyes. When finally freed, he made no attempt to stand, his emaciated body trembling with exhaustion. "You're safe now," Sarah whispered, running her hands gently over his body, cataloging injuries with professional detachment, severe malnutrition, pressure sores on his hips, lacerations around his neck and legs, an old fracture in his rear left leg that had healed improperly. Whoever had done this had kept him captive for months, possibly years. Sarah retrieved a water bottle from her car, pouring some into her cupped palm. The dog lapped weakly, his tail offering the faintest thump against the asphalt. Only then did she examine the worn leather collar more closely, fingers tracing over the engraved tag. The phone number was partially worn away, but still legible. "Let's find out who you belong to. Duke." Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed, unsure what kind of person she might reach. The phone rang 4 times before a gruff male voice answered. "Fletcher?" "Hello. I found a dog on Route 29 outside Millridge. His tag says Duke with this number." The silence that followed stretched so long Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Then came a ragged inhale, like a drowning man breaking the surface. "What color is he?" The voice had transformed, tight with restrained emotion. "German Shepherd, black and tan, male. He's in bad shape, sir. Very malnourished. Looks like he's been—" "Where exactly are you?" The man cut her off, his voice now urgent. In the background, Sarah heard keys jangling, a door slamming. She described her location, adding, "I'm a veterinarian. He needs immediate medical attention. I can take him to—" "Don't move, please." The naked plea in the man's voice stopped her short. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. His name is Duke. He's my daughter's dog." The line went dead. Sarah looked down at Duke, who had managed to rest his head against her knee, eyes fixed on her face with unnerving intelligence. "Your owner's coming, boy. Just hang in there." 18 minutes later, headlights cut through the growing darkness as a battered blue pickup skidded to a stop behind Sarah's Chevy. A tall man with salt and pepper hair erupted from the driver's side, moving with the urgent purpose of someone twice his apparent age. When Robert Fletcher saw the dog lying beside the road, his knees buckled. He dropped to the gravel, crawling the last few feet. "Duke," he whispered, voice breaking. "Oh, my God, Duke." The German Shepherd's reaction removed any doubt this was indeed his owner. Despite his weakened state, Duke whined, his tail thumping weakly as he struggled to lift his head. Robert gathered the dog gently into his arms, burying his face in the matted fur, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sarah stood awkwardly, witnessing a reunion so raw and private she felt like an intruder. After a long moment, Robert looked up, tears cutting clean tracks through the stubble on his weathered face. "My daughter Lily, she's been missing for 2 years. Duke disappeared with her." His voice cracked. "Where did you find him? Was there—" He couldn't finish the question. He was alone, Sarah said gently. In a garbage bag, tied up. Someone left him for dead on the road. Robert's expression darkened, hands gently examining Duke's emaciated frame. Who would do this to you? Boy, where's Lily? The questions weren't meant for Sarah, but for the dog who couldn't answer. He needs medical attention, Sarah said firmly. I have a clinic in Charlottesville, but that's an hour away. Is there somewhere closer? Millridge Animal Hospital is 15 minutes from here. Robert carefully lifted Duke, who weighed far less than he should. I'm Robert Fletcher, former detective with Millridge PD. Sarah Winters. I'm a veterinarian. She gathered her emergency kit. I'll follow you there. At the animal hospital, Sarah's professional credentials granted them immediate access despite the late hour. The on-duty veterinarian, Dr. Patterson, worked alongside Sarah to stabilize Duke, while Robert paced the waiting room, making phone calls. The examination revealed the full extent of Duke's condition: severe malnutrition, multiple healed fractures, evidence of prolonged confinement, and most recently blunt force trauma to his rib cage. During the examination, Sarah noticed something unusual, a distinct chemical smell in Duke's fur, and traces of red clay embedded in his paw pads. This soil isn't common around here, she commented, collecting samples. And this scent, industrial solvent, maybe like the kind used in factories. Robert's eyes narrowed. The initial search for Lily focused on the northwest section of the county. There's an abandoned textile mill out that way. It was searched, but a dog can't cross-examine witnesses, Sarah finished, understanding dawning. Mr. Fletcher, Robert. I think Duke escaped recently. These wounds are fresh, within the last 48 hours, and he traveled some distance. His paw pads are worn raw. Robert stared at Duke, now sedated and receiving IV fluids. He wouldn't leave Lily unless... He couldn't complete the thought. Or unless he was trying to get help, Sarah said quietly. When Dr. Patterson stepped away, Robert leaned close to Sarah, his voice low and intense. The police gave up on Lily a year ago, said there wasn't enough evidence. That child predator cases go cold if you don't solve them in the first 48 hours. Bitterness edged his words. It cost me my marriage, my career. Everyone thinks I'm just a broken man who can't accept reality. He gestured toward Duke. But he's proof. Proof Lily might still be alive somewhere. His eyes met Sarah's. Desperate hope, warring with fear. Will you help me? Please, Duke trusts you. And I don't have anyone else to ask. Sarah looked at the sedated German shepherd, then at the broken man beside her. She'd planned to spend the next month healing from her own loss at a lakeside cabin. Instead, she found herself nodding. I'll help. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Millridge Animal Hospital's recovery room. Duke lay on a padded bed, IV fluids dripping steadily into his vein. His condition had stabilized overnight, though Dr. Patterson warned he remained critically undernourished. Robert hadn't left the dog's side, dozing in an uncomfortable plastic chair until Sarah returned with coffee and a paper bag containing a sandwich. You need to eat, she said, placing the items on a small table. "Duke's going to need you at full strength." Robert accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "I called Sheriff Hayes this morning. Told him about Duke." He took a sip, grimacing at either the taste or the memory. He said, and I quote, "A half-dead dog ain't evidence. Fletcher, we've been through this." Sarah sat in the chair opposite, watching Duke's chest rise and fall with each shallow breath. "What's your plan?" Then, "Duke came from somewhere." "Came from—" Robert's voice took on the methodical tone of a detective. "If we can retrace his path, maybe it leads to Lily. He was barely alive when I found him. He couldn't have traveled far in that condition. Which means she could be close." The hope in Robert's voice was painful to hear. A knock at the door interrupted them. A man in his early 60s with a military straight posture entered, nodding at Robert before turning his attention to Duke. "My God," he murmured, approaching the bed slowly. "It really is him." "Sarah, this is Frank Miller," Robert said. "He trained Duke before I got him for Lily." Frank gently placed a hand on Duke's head. The sedated dog's tail twitched in recognition. "Special dog, this one. One of the smartest I ever trained." "Frank was K-9 unit before he retired," Robert explained. "Duke wasn't just a pet. He was trained for protection and search work." Frank turned to Sarah, his weathered face serious. "Duke was part of a specialized program. We train dogs to protect their primary handlers in this case, Lily, but also to seek help if separated. These dogs can backtrack home from miles away." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You're saying he wasn't just escaping. He was deliberately seeking help." "Duke was trained to find his way to trusted locations or people if something happened to Lily," Frank confirmed. "He knows Robert's scent, knows home, knows to seek out uniforms or vehicles that look like police." "Then why now?" Robert's voice cracked. "It's been 2 years." "Frank." The older man shook his head. "Could be he was kept confined. Couldn't escape until recently. Or—" He hesitated. "Or what?" Sarah pressed. "Or something changed. Something that made him risk everything to get out." Frank's implication hung heavy in the air. Robert stood abruptly. "We need to follow his trail back. Now. Today." "Hold on," Sarah cautioned. "Duke can barely stand. We can't just drag him back out there." "We don't need to," Frank said. "I can track where he came from based on where you found him. The condition of his paws, the soil samples you collected, they'll tell us direction and distance." "I'll call Sheriff Hayes again," Robert said. Reaching for his phone, Frank placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Bob, you know how Hayes feels about this case. He's not going to mobilize resources for what he considers a wild goose chase." "Then to hell with him." Robert's fist came down hard on the table, making the coffee cups jump. "My daughter is out there, and we'll find her," Frank said firmly. "But if we go in half-cocked, whoever has her will know we're coming." The tension in the room was broken by the arrival of Sheriff William Hayes himself, his substantial frame filling the doorway. At 55, Hayes had the ruddy complexion of a man who spent too much time outdoors and not enough time exercising. "Thought I might find you here." "Fletcher," he said, tipping his hat to Sarah. "Ma'am." "Sheriff," Robert acknowledged stiffly. Hayes approached Duke's bed, studying the dog with narrowed eyes. "Vet says he's in pretty rough shape. He was zip-tied and dumped in a garbage bag. Sarah said sharply. "Left to die on Route 29. The sheriff's expression remained impassive. "And you figure this has something to do with Lily's case?" "Duke disappeared the same day she did," Robert said, struggling to keep his voice level. "Now he shows up, half dead, after escaping from somewhere. That's not coincidence, Bill." "Coincidences happen all the time in this line of work," Hayes replied, though his eyes lingered on Duke's injuries. "Could be someone found him wandering years ago, kept him, abused him, then dumped him when he got sick. Then—" "Explain this," Sarah interjected, retrieving a small evidence bag from her purse. Inside was a single strand of red yarn. "This was caught in his collar. Lab-grade acrylic yarn, not something you'd find in most homes. And there are traces of industrial chemicals in his fur solvents used in manufacturing." "You're a veterinarian," Hayes said, not unkindly. "Not a forensic specialist." "I spent 20 years working with the Humane Society on animal abuse cases," Sarah shot back. "I know evidence when I see it," Hayes sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through thinning gray hair. "Look, I understand this seems significant to you, Bob, but I can't justify reopening a cold case based on a dog showing up." Frank stepped forward. "Bill, you know me. 30 years with the K9 unit. I trained Duke myself." He pointed to the dog. "Look at his condition. He traveled miles in this state because he was trained to seek help when his handler is in danger. That's not normal dog behavior, that's specialized training kicking in." A muscle worked in Hayes's jaw as he looked between the three determined faces. "Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, what exactly would you have me do? Search the entire county again based on a dog's path?" "Start with the old Westmoreland textile factory," Robert said immediately. "The soil on Duke's paws matches that area, and the chemicals are consistent with what would be found there. We searched that place top to bottom 2 years ago." Hayes objected. "Nothing." "Then we missed something," Robert insisted, stepping closer to Hayes. "Bill, I've never asked you for anything since you shut down the investigation. I'm asking now. One search. That's all." Hayes studied Robert's face for a long moment before turning to Sarah. "You found the dog. You believe all this?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I believe Duke came from somewhere nearby, and someone tried to make sure he wouldn't lead anyone back there. That's enough for me." The sheriff's shoulders sagged slightly. "One search. Tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow, but I'm bringing just 2 deputies, no media, no circus. And Fletcher," he fixed Robert with a stern look, "you follow my lead. 1 hint of vigilante nonsense, and I'll have you in a cell so fast your head will spin." After Hayes left, a tense silence filled the room. Robert's hands were shaking as he sank back into his chair. "He's humoring us," he said bitterly. "Going through the motions." "It's a start," Frank said, squeezing Robert's shoulder. "More than we had yesterday." Sarah watched as Duke's eyes flickered open briefly, his gaze fixing on Robert before drifting closed again. There was something in that look, an intelligence, a desperation that strengthened her resolve. "I need to make some calls," she said, standing. "Cancel my cabin reservation. Arrange for someone to cover my clinic shifts." Robert looked up, surprise evident on his exhausted face. "You're staying until we find Lily?" Sarah confirmed. or until we know what happened to her. What she couldn't say, was that for the first time since losing Jason, she felt a purpose beyond grief, in Duke's determined struggle to survive, in Robert's unwavering faith. She recognized something she'd lost hope. The Westmoreland textile factory had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades, its red brick facade crumbling into the encroaching Virginia wilderness. Kudzu vines strangled the once imposing smokestacks, and shattered windows gaped like missing teeth. The factory complex sprawled across 12 acres, bordered by dense woods to the north and east, with a small creek running along its southern edge. Sheriff Hayes's cruiser led the small convoy up the weed-choked access road, followed by Robert's pickup and a county animal control van where Frank traveled with Duke. Despite Dr. Patterson's objections, they'd brought the recovering German shepherd, hoping he might react to familiar surroundings. Sarah rode with Robert, the silence between them heavy with anticipation and doubt. "I've been here before," Robert said, breaking the silence as the factory came into view. "2 years ago, when the search was still active, we went through every building with cadaver dogs." Sarah studied his profile, noting the muscle twitching in his jaw. What if the dogs missed something? They're trained to detect human remains, even in trace amounts. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. If Lily had been here... He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah understood if cadaver dogs had alerted. It would have meant Lily was dead. The absence of evidence had been Robert's tenuous lifeline to hope. The small team gathered at the main entrance, where Sheriff Hayes issued terse instructions. "We stay together. These buildings aren't structurally sound. Fletcher, you and Ms. Winters keep that dog controlled. Jenkins, Ramirez..." He nodded to his deputies. "You take point and rear. 4 hours. Then we're done." Frank had fitted Duke with a specialized harness that supported his weakened frame. The dog's demeanor had changed noticeably since arriving. His ears were alert, body tense despite his condition. "He recognizes this place," Frank murmured to Sarah. "Watch his behavior. Any change could be significant." They began with the main production floor, a cavernous space filled with rusting machinery and decades of debris. Sunlight slanted through broken windows, illuminating dust motes that swirled in their wake. Duke moved slowly but deliberately, his nose working constantly, pulling Frank toward the northeast corner. "This was cleared," Hayes said, frustration evident in his voice as they followed. "Every inch." The dog led them to a loading dock area where massive doors once allowed trucks to receive shipments. Duke's behavior intensified, tail rigid, muscles trembling with effort as he strained against the harness. "He's on to something," Frank said, allowing the dog more lead. Duke moved to a section of concrete flooring that appeared unremarkable except for some recent scratches. He pawed insistently at one spot, then looked back at Frank with unmistakable intent. "There's nothing there, Fletcher," Hayes said. But Robert was already kneeling, examining the floor. "These marks are fresh," he said, tracing what appeared to be drag lines in the dust and grime. "Something heavy was moved recently." Deputy Ramirez shone his flashlight on the area. "Could be local kids. This place is a known hangout." "Kids don't usually move industrial equipment," Sarah observed, pointing to a rectangular pattern of cleaner concrete surrounded by dust. "Something was here for years and was recently removed." Hayes reluctantly directed his deputies to search the area more thoroughly. Duke remained fixated on the spot, occasionally emitting low whines that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand up. "Check for hidden access points," Robert instructed, slipping back into detective mode. "False floors. concealed doors. While the others searched, Sarah noticed Duke's attention shift subtly. He was now looking upward at regular intervals, as if tracking something invisible. Following his gaze, she noticed a series of old surveillance camera mounts near the ceiling. "Robert," she called softly, "look at the camera positions. They're still here, but the cameras are gone." Robert followed her gesture, brow furrowing. "Those aren't original to the factory. They're Modern Mount's wireless system." His eyes widened. "Someone's been monitoring this place." Sheriff Hayes overheard. "Or it could be the property management company installed security after vandalism problems." "Then where are the cameras now?" Robert challenged. "And why remove them from a property you're supposedly monitoring?" Before Hayes could respond, Duke suddenly stiffened, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His focus had shifted to the main entrance where they'd come in. Frank immediately responded to the dog's change in demeanor. "Someone's here," he whispered. Duke's been trained to alert to approaching strangers." Hayes signaled his deputies, who drew their weapons and moved toward the entrance with practiced efficiency. The sheriff himself hung back, positioning himself protectively near Robert and Sarah. "Sheriff Hayes." "Hello?" A male voice called from the entrance. "It's Michael Wilson." "I was told you were out here." Hayes relaxed visibly, holstering his weapon. "It's just Michael," he said to the others. "Local music teacher. Probably heard about our search from dispatch." But as Michael Wilson entered the cavernous space, Duke's reaction was immediate and alarming. The dog lunged against his harness, barking furiously, his previous weakness seemingly forgotten in a surge of aggression. "Whoa!" Frank struggled to control the straining dog. "Easy, Duke." Wilson stopped in his tracks, raising his hands slightly. "That dog doesn't seem to like me much," he said with a nervous laugh. In his early 50s, Wilson had the pleasant, unremarkable appearance of someone who'd spent decades blending into small-town life, thinning brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, casual clothing that was neither fashionable nor outdated. "Sorry about that," Hayes said, approaching Wilson. "He's been through some trauma. What brings you out here?" "Michael. Heard on the scanner there was activity at the old factory," Wilson replied, his eyes never leaving Duke. "When I heard Robert's name mentioned, I thought it might be about Lily. Wanted to see if there was any news." Robert stared at Wilson, his expression unreadable. "You taught Lily piano," he said flatly. "For 3 years." Wilson nodded, his expression softening with apparent sympathy. "She was a gifted student. I've never stopped praying for her return. Robert." Throughout this exchange, Duke's aggressive posture hadn't diminished. If anything, he seemed more agitated, straining toward Wilson with such force that Frank was visibly struggling to restrain him. "Something's wrong with that dog," Wilson commented, taking a step back. Sarah moved closer to Duke, speaking soothingly while observing his behavior. The German shepherd's focus was laser-fixed on Wilson, his teeth bared, body trembling with tension. "Mr. Wilson," Sarah asked carefully, "have you ever met this dog before?" Wilson adjusted his glasses, appearing confused by the question. "No, I don't believe so. I'm not really a dog person. Allergies." Duke barked sharply at the sound of Wilson's voice, lunging again. "Frank," Robert said quietly. Duke was trained to recognize and respond to threats to Lily. Wasn't he? Frank nodded slowly, comprehension dawning on his weathered face. He was specifically trained to recognize anyone who showed aggressive intent toward her. To remember them. The implication hung heavy in the air. Hayes shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Wilson and the snarling dog. "Let's not jump to conclusions based on an animal's behavior," he cautioned. "Michael's been a respected member of this community for 15 years. 12 years, Robert corrected automatically. He moved here in 2011. Wilson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. 12, 15 who keeps track. Small towns all blend together after a while. Sarah knelt beside Duke, whispering gentle reassurances while studying his reactions. On impulse, she took out her phone and played a brief recording of Wilson's voice she'd just captured. Duke's reaction was immediate, his ears flattened, and a deep growl rumbled in his chest. "That's interesting," she said, looking up at Robert meaningfully. Robert's detective instincts had fully awakened. "Michael, you said you heard about our search on the scanner. But we deliberately kept this off the radio. Hayes used cell phones to coordinate. How did you really know we were here?" Wilson's pleasant expression faltered for just a moment. "I must have misheard. Perhaps someone at the station mentioned it when I stopped by earlier." "I didn't tell anyone at the station," Hayes said slowly, his hand drifting toward his holster. "Just my 2 deputies here." The atmosphere had shifted palpably. Wilson glanced around, seemingly calculating distances to exits. "This is absurd," he said, forcing a laugh. "You're suspecting me based on a dog's behavior. I came here out of concern. Robert, we all want to find Lily." "Duke was with Lily when she disappeared," Robert said, stepping closer to Wilson. "He would have protected her. The only way someone could have taken her is if they incapacitated him first." "I wouldn't know anything about that," Wilson replied, his voice steady but his eyes darting briefly to Duke's scarred face. Sarah had been watching this exchange intently, and now she stood. "Mr. Wilson, when I mentioned Duke's name earlier, you didn't ask who Duke was. You immediately knew we were talking about a dog." Wilson's facade cracked slightly. "It's obviously a dog's name." "But how did you know it was Lily's dog?" Sarah pressed. Robert never mentioned that connection. A subtle change came over Wilson's expression, something cold and calculating replacing the neighborly concern. "This has gone far enough. I came to help, and I'm being treated like a suspect." He turned to Hayes. "Sheriff, I've been a law-abiding citizen and community volunteer for years. This is harassment." Hayes looked troubled, caught between his instinct to support a respected community member and the mounting irregularities. "Michael, nobody's accusing you of anything, but given the circumstances, would you mind coming down to the station to answer a few questions, just to clear things up?" Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Am I under arrest, Sheriff?" "No, of course not." "Then I'm afraid I must decline. I have piano lessons scheduled this afternoon." Wilson began backing toward the entrance. "I'm sorry about your daughter, Robert, truly, but this is grief, making you irrational." As Wilson turned to leave, Duke suddenly wrenched free from Frank's grip with desperate strength. Lunging toward the retreating man, Wilson moved with surprising quickness, dodging the weakened dog and breaking into a run toward the exit. "Stop him!" Robert shouted. already in pursuit. Hayes and his deputies reacted instantly, racing after Wilson. The music teacher had reached the main doors when Deputy Ramirez tackled him from behind, bringing him down hard on the concrete floor. Within moments, Hayes had him in handcuffs. "Michael Wilson, you're being detained for questioning in connection with the disappearance of Lily Fletcher," Hayes announced, his official tone masking obvious confusion at the situation's rapid escalation. Wilson's pleasant mask had completely disappeared, replaced by cold fury. "You have nothing on me," he spat. "Nothing but a half-dead dog's reaction. No judge will issue a warrant based on that." Frank had retrieved Duke, who was trembling from exertion but still fixated on Wilson. Sarah checked the dog quickly, concerned that the outburst had worsened his condition. "Sheriff," Robert said, his voice shaking with restrained emotion, "I want a search warrant for Wilson's property. All his properties." Hayes hesitated. "Bob, I understand why you think—" "Look at Duke," Robert interrupted, pointing to the German shepherd who remained focused on Wilson despite his exhaustion. "That's not random aggression. That's recognition. Duke knows him, and not in a good way." Sarah stepped forward. "Sheriff Hayes, I've worked with traumatized animals for 20 years. Duke's reaction is specific and directed. In abuse cases, this type of response is typically reserved for the abuser." Hayes rubbed his forehead, clearly weighing professional caution against the bizarre circumstances. "I'll call Judge Thornton, but no promises. Fletcher, and you," he looked pointedly at Wilson, "have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it until we sort this out." As the deputies escorted Wilson to a cruiser, Robert knelt beside Duke, gently stroking the exhausted dog's head. "Good boy," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You did good." Sarah joined him, checking Duke's vital signs with concern. "He's pushed himself too hard. We need to get him back to the clinic." "He recognized Wilson," Robert said, looking up at her with renewed determination. "After 2 years, he remembered the man who took Lily." "We don't know that for certain yet," Sarah cautioned, though she believed it herself. "But it's enough to justify a deeper investigation." While Frank and Sarah carefully loaded Duke into the animal control van, Robert approached Sheriff Hayes, who was on the phone with the judge. "We need to look into Wilson's background more thoroughly," Robert insisted when Hayes ended the call. "Previous residences, employment history, any complaints or allegations?" Hayes nodded reluctantly. "Judge Thornton is issuing a limited search warrant for Wilson's current residence based on his suspicious behavior and flight attempt. It's thin, but it's enough to start." "What about the factory Duke was fixated on that spot in the loading dock?" "I've called for a forensic team from the state police," Hayes admitted. "Maybe they'll find something we missed." As they prepared to leave, Sarah noticed Duke's attention had shifted back to the factory interior despite his exhaustion. Following his gaze, she noticed something they'd overlooked: a metal drain cover in the floor near where Duke had been pawing earlier. "Robert," she called, pointing to the drain. "Look!" The drain cover appeared unremarkable, aged and rusted like everything else in the abandoned factory. But when Robert shone his flashlight directly on it, a subtle difference became apparent. The rust pattern was inconsistent with the surrounding floor. "This has been removed recently," he said, crouching to examine it closer. "See these scratch marks? Someone's pried this up." Hayes joined them, skepticism warring with curiosity on his face. "Could be maintenance, vandals, copper thieves." Robert was already working to lift the heavy cover. grunting with effort as it finally gave way. The beam of his flashlight illuminated a deep drainage shaft and something that made Sarah's blood run cold, a small pink hair ribbon, caught on a metal protrusion just below the opening. "That's Lily's," Robert whispered, reaching carefully to retrieve it. "She was wearing them the day she disappeared. Caroline had just done her hair." His voice broke. Hayes stared at the ribbon, the last of his professional detachment crumbling. "I'll get a forensics team in here right now," he said, already reaching for his radio. "And I'm upgrading that warrant for Wilson's property to include any electronic devices, vehicles, storage units, everything," as the sheriff walked away barking orders into his radio. Sarah placed a hand on Robert's trembling shoulder. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is the breakthrough you've been waiting for." Robert clutched the small ribbon, his weathered face transformed by a complex mixture of hope, fear, and grim determination. "She was here," he said, his voice barely audible. "My little girl was here." From the animal control van, Duke watched them through the window, his amber eyes alert despite his exhaustion. Something in his gaze seemed to say what everyone was now thinking: "We're getting closer." The forensics team from the state police worked methodically through the night, their portable lights casting harsh shadows across the factory's cavernous interior. The drain where Lily's ribbon had been found became the center of an expanding grid search. By dawn, they had discovered that the drainage system had been modified. What appeared to be a standard industrial drain actually connected to a narrow maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the factory floor. Robert paced the perimeter of the search area, looking haggard after a sleepless night. Sarah had spent most of the night at the animal hospital with Duke, returning shortly after sunrise with coffee and sandwiches for the search team. "Any news on Duke?" Robert asked, accepting a cup gratefully. "Stable but weak," Sarah replied, watching the technicians photograph evidence markers. "Dr. Patterson says he needs complete rest, but he's fighting the sedatives. It's like he knows something important is happening." Sheriff Hayes approached, his face lined with fatigue beneath the brim of his hat. "State boys found something," he said without preamble. "You'd better come see." They followed Hayes to where the forensic team had set up a makeshift evidence table. A technician in white coveralls carefully placed a plastic evidence bag in front of them. Inside was a small notebook with a purple cover, its pages warped from moisture. "Found it lodged in a crevice about 30 feet into the drainage tunnel," Hayes explained. "Initial examination suggests it's been there at least a year, maybe 2. Robert stared at the notebook, recognition dawning in his eyes. "That's Lily's diary," he whispered. "Caroline got it for her 10th birthday. She wrote in it every night." The lead forensic technician, a stern-faced woman with prematurely gray hair, stepped forward. "We haven't processed it fully yet, but several pages contain what appear to be entries dated after Lily's disappearance." Robert's knees nearly buckled. Sarah steadied him with a hand on his arm as Hayes continued. "There's more. The tunnel leads to a small room that was originally a maintenance access point for the factory's drainage system. It's been modified insulated walls, a cot, some basic amenities. Someone was living down there, or at least using it regularly. Lily." Robert's voice cracked on his daughter's name. "No evidence she's been there recently," Hayes said carefully. "But there are indications someone small was kept there. And—" he hesitated, choosing his words. "There are scratch marks on the inside of the door. Someone was locked in." Robert closed his eyes briefly, his face a mask of anguish and rage. "Wilson," he said through clenched teeth. "We're building the case." Hayes assured him. "The search of Wilson's house is underway. District Attorney's on board, says if we find anything concrete connecting him to this room, we can charge him." "What about Lily?" Sarah asked the question Robert seemed unable to voice. "If she's not there now." "We found this," the forensic technician interjected, producing another evidence bag. Inside was a crumpled receipt from a gas station in Covington, dated just 3 weeks earlier. It was in the trash can inside the hidden room. "Covington's about 30 miles northwest," Hayes explained. "Up in the mountains." Robert's detective instincts surfaced through his emotional turmoil. Wilson must have moved her. When Duke escaped, he knew it was only a matter of time before someone followed the trail back here. Hayes nodded grimly. "We've put out an APB for any properties connected to Wilson in Covington and surrounding areas. State police are coordinating with neighboring counties." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call from the animal hospital. She stepped away to answer it, returning moments later with urgency in her stride. "Duke's awake and agitated," she reported. "Doctor, Patterson says he's never seen anything like it. He's trying to get out of his cage, barking at the staff. It started about 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes, Robert repeated, glancing at his watch. "That's when the officers would have arrived at Wilson's house with the search warrant." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You think the dog somehow knows?" "I think Duke is connected to this case in ways we don't fully understand." Robert replied, "I want to bring him here." "Absolutely not," Sarah objected. "He's in no condition." "Not for the physical exertion," Robert clarified. "For his tracking abilities. Duke was specifically trained to track Lily, her scent, her possessions. If we have her diary, he might be able to give us some indication of where she is now." Hayes looked skeptical, but didn't object when Robert continued. "Frank says Duke was trained to recognize locations on maps. It's a specialized technique used for search and rescue dogs." "You want to show a dog a map and expect him to point out where your daughter is?" Hayes's tone conveyed his disbelief. "I want to try everything," Robert said firmly. "Everything." While the debate continued, Sarah's phone buzzed again with a text message from Frank. "Turn on local news. Now!" She quickly pulled up a news app on her phone, the others gathering around as the video loaded. A reporter stood outside Wilson's modest suburban home where police activity was visible in the background. Developing story in Millridge, where police have descended on the home of Michael Wilson, a local music teacher. Sources tell us this search is connected to the disappearance of Lily Fletcher, who vanished 2 years ago during a school field trip. Wilson has been taken into custody for questioning. "Damn it," Hayes swore, already reaching for his radio. "Who leaked this to the press?" But Robert was focused on something else in the video, a glimpse of officers bringing out evidence bags from Wilson's home. "Freeze it there," he instructed Sarah, pointing to her phone screen. She paused the video, zooming in on what appeared to be a clear plastic evidence bag containing colorful fabric. "That's Lily's backpack," Robert said, his voice hollow with realization. "The one she had when she disappeared." Hayes immediately called the search team leader at Wilson's house, confirming they had indeed found a child's backpack, matching Lily's description concealed in a locked chest in Wilson's attic. along with other disturbing items, girls' clothing in various sizes, USB drives, and a collection of hair ribbons identical to the one found in the factory drain. They've also found a laptop with encrypted files, Hayes reported after hanging up. Tech team's working on it now, and there's a rental agreement for a cabin near Lake Sherwood in Covington County. That's it, Robert said, already moving toward the exit. That's where she is. Hold on, Hayes cautioned, physically blocking his path. We do this by the book. Fletcher, I'm coordinating with Covington Sheriff's Department right now. They'll secure the location. And if Wilson has accomplices, Robert challenged, if someone monitoring the news sees he's been arrested and decides to move Lily again or worse. The sheriff's face darkened at the implication. I'm not taking chances with a child's life. We're moving now. But as a coordinated operation. He turned to Sarah. Ms. Winters, I have to ask you to stay here. This is about to become a multi-agency tactical operation. I'm going to get Duke, she said firmly. Robert's right. Duke may be our best chance of finding Lily quickly if she's been moved from the cabin. And I'm the only one he trusts besides Robert. Hayes knew better than to argue further. Fine. Meet us at the station in 30 minutes. We're mobilizing everything we've got. An hour later, a convoy of police vehicles sped northwest along the winding mountain roads toward Covington County. In the lead cruiser, Hayes drove while Robert sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring at the green hills that seemed to swallow the narrow road ahead. Behind them, Sarah rode with Frank and Duke in an SUV outfitted with emergency veterinary supplies. Wilson's not talking, Hayes said, breaking the tense silence. Lawyered up the minute he was processed, but the evidence from his house is damning. D.A. says we've got enough for kidnapping charges already, even without finding Lily. I don't care about charges, Robert said flatly. I care about my daughter. The radio crackled with updates from the Covington Sheriff's Department. They had located the cabin, a remote property accessible only by a private dirt road, and were setting up surveillance from a distance. No activity had been observed, but a vehicle matching the description of Wilson's second car, a green Subaru Forester, was parked outside. As they approached the rendezvous point, a wooded turnout about a mile from the target location, Hayes's radio crackled again. The surveillance team reported movement at the cabin. A man had emerged, appeared to be loading items into the Subaru. Subject appears to be preparing to leave the location, the voice on the radio reported. Request instructions. Hayes grabbed the radio. Maintain position. Do not approach. We're 5 minutes out. Robert's face had gone ashen. They're moving her, he said, his voice barely audible. We're going to lose her again. Not this time, Hayes promised, pressing the accelerator harder as the cruiser sped around a curve. At the rendezvous point, organized chaos ensued as tactical teams from both counties coordinated their approach. Maps were spread across the hood of Hayes's cruiser as the operation commander, a stern-faced state police captain, outlined the plan. Cabin sits on 3 acres, heavily wooded on all sides. Single-access road with poor visibility. We've identified 2 adult males on the property. One matches the description of Wilson's brother-in-law, Thomas Jenkins. No visual confirmation of the girl or any other children yet. Robert stood slightly apart, his focus entirely on Duke. The German shepherd, though still weakened, had become increasingly alert as they approached the area. Now, as Frank helped him from the SUV. Duke's posture changed dramatically, ears forward, body tense with recognition. "He knows this place," Frank said quietly to Sarah. "Or he knows Lily is nearby." Sarah approached the tactical team, interrupting their planning. "Before you go in, let Duke try to locate Lily. He's trained to find her, and he might detect her, even if she's hidden." The state police captain looked skeptical, but Hayes nodded. "The dog found his way back after 2 years. I wouldn't discount him." With reluctant agreement from the tactical team, Frank fitted Duke with a lightweight tracking harness. The dog's transformation was remarkable despite his physical weakness. Determination seemed to flow through him as Robert knelt to present Lily's diary. "Find Lily. Duke," Robert whispered, his voice breaking. "Find our girl." Duke sniffed the diary intently, then looked up at Robert with newfound purpose. Frank allowed him to lead, following the dog's cues as he moved purposefully toward the edge of the turnout, nose working the air currents. To everyone's surprise, Duke didn't head toward the road leading to the cabin. Instead, he pulled Frank toward a faint trail leading into the dense woods. "He's not going toward the cabin," the state police captain objected. "We need to move on the primary target." "Split the team," Hayes decided immediately. "Captain, take your people to the cabin as planned. I'll go with Fletcher and the dog." Robert was already following Duke and Frank into the trees, Sarah close behind with her medical bag. Hayes and 2 deputies quickly joined them, while the main tactical force continued preparations for the cabin raid. The trail Duke followed grew fainter as they pushed deeper into the forest. The dog moved with single-minded purpose, stopping occasionally to reorient himself before continuing with renewed determination. After 15 minutes of increasingly difficult terrain, they came upon a small clearing where the remains of an old hunting shelter stood little more than 3 crumbling stone walls and the remnants of a roof. Duke's behavior changed abruptly. He began pawing frantically at the ground near the back wall, whining with unmistakable urgency. "There's something here," Robert said, dropping to his knees beside Duke. His hands brushed away leaves and debris, revealing what appeared to be a rusted metal handle set into the ground. Hayes and his deputies instantly recognized what they were seeing, a concealed cellar door or bunker entrance. With practiced efficiency, they drew their weapons while Robert and Frank carefully cleared more debris. "Millridge Sheriff's Department," Hayes called out. "Anyone inside? Identify yourself now." Silence answered him, broken only by Duke's increasingly frantic whining. Hayes nodded to his deputies, who positioned themselves on either side of the hidden door while Robert grasped the handle. "On 3, Hayes instructed. 1, 2, 3. The door opened with surprising ease, revealing a set of crude wooden steps descending into darkness. The beam of Hayes's flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating a space that turned Robert's blood to ice, a small underground room. Walls lined with soundproofing material, containing a narrow cot, a portable toilet, and a small table. And on the cot, frozen in terror at the sudden intrusion, sat a painfully thin girl with tangled blonde hair, her blue eyes wide with disbelief as they fixed on Robert's face. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Duke broke free from Frank's hold, nearly tumbling down the steps in his desperation to reach Lily. The girl's expression transformed from fear to wonder as the German shepherd rushed to her, whimpering and licking her face, while she clutched him with trembling arms. "Duke came back," she sobbed into his fur. "You came back for me." Robert stood paralyzed at the top of the stairs, unable to process the reality before him. His daughter, alive. After 2 years of unimaginable darkness, then his paralysis broke, and he was moving, sliding down the steps, gathering both Lily and Duke into his arms as sobs tore from his chest. "I found you," he kept repeating, rocking her gently. "I found you." Outside, Hayes radioed the tactical team with the news, even as he dispatched one deputy to guide paramedics to their location. Sarah stood at the bunker entrance, tears streaming down her face as she watched the reunion she'd helped make possible. Duke, despite his weakened state, refused to leave Lily's side even as medical personnel arrived. His mission, against all odds, was finally complete. The ambulance wailed through the mountain roads, its precious cargo sheltered inside. Lily Fletcher lay on a gurney, an IV delivering fluids to her severely dehydrated body, while Duke remained pressed against her side despite the paramedics' attempts to separate them. Robert sat holding his daughter's hand, as if letting go might cause her to vanish again. Sarah rode in front with the driver, occasionally glancing back at the tableau that simultaneously broke and mended her heart. Millridge Regional Hospital erupted into controlled chaos when they arrived. Medical staff swarmed the ambulance, whisking Lily through the emergency entrance while a team of doctors barked orders for tests and assessments. In the confusion, hospital security attempted to prevent Duke from entering the building. "No dogs allowed, sir. Hospital policy," a stern-faced security guard informed Robert, blocking Duke's path. Before Robert could argue, Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying the calm authority of a medical professional. "This is a certified support animal essential to the patient's mental well-being," she lied smoothly. "Separating them would cause severe psychological distress to a victim of extreme trauma." The guard hesitated, looking to his supervisor, who nodded reluctantly. "Keep him controlled," the supervisor instructed, "and he'll need to be examined by veterinary staff as soon as possible." As they followed Lily's gurney into a trauma room, Robert squeezed Sarah's arm in silent gratitude. Duke limped alongside them, his determination overriding his physical weakness. The initial medical assessment painted a grim picture of Lily's condition. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the attending physician, outlined her findings in the private consultation room where Robert, Sarah, and Sheriff Hayes had gathered while Lily underwent further tests. Severe malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies, consistent with long-term inadequate nutrition, Dr. Ramirez explained, her compassionate eyes softening the clinical assessment. Multiple healed fractures, left radius, 3 ribs, right ankle suggesting repeated physical abuse, skin infections from prolonged confinement in unsanitary conditions, and she hesitated, glancing at Robert. Signs of prolonged psychological trauma. She's dissociative, speaks very little, and becomes extremely agitated when Duke is removed from her sight. Robert sat with his head bowed, shoulders shaking silently. Hayes placed a steadying hand on his friend's back. "What's the prognosis?" Sarah asked quietly. "Physically, with proper nutrition and care, she should recover." Dr. Ramirez replied, "The psychological trauma, that's harder to predict. We've called in Dr. Nathaniel Spencer from Children's Hospital in Richmond. He specializes in recovery from captivity trauma." Robert raised his head, eyes red-rimmed but focused. "When can I take her home?" Not for at least a week. Dr. Ramirez said gently. She needs close monitoring and treatment. And Mr. Fletcher, she added carefully, you should prepare yourself. Recovery will be a long road. The Lily you knew 2 years ago, she's experienced things that change a person fundamentally. When they were permitted to see Lily again, they found her curled around Duke in her hospital bed, her thin fingers buried in his fur. A nurse explained that she'd become hysterical when they tried to separate them for an MRI. So the dog had been allowed to stay after a quick examination by the hospital's volunteer veterinarian. "Hey, sweetheart," Robert said softly, approaching the bed slowly. "How are you feeling?" Lily's eyes, so like her mother's, regarded him warily. She whispered something inaudible. What was that? "Lily." Robert leaned closer. "Is it really over?" she asked, her voice barely audible. For real this time? The question struck Robert like a physical blow. "Yes, baby. It's over for real. You're safe now." Lily nodded once, then turned her face into Duke's fur. The German shepherd licked her cheek gently, his amber eyes never leaving Robert's face, as if passing a silent message. She needs time. Sheriff Hayes appeared in the doorway, gesturing for Robert to join him in the hallway. Sarah stayed with Lily, sitting quietly in the corner of the room. The raid on the cabin was successful, Hayes reported in low tones. Thomas Jenkins is in custody. We found evidence of 3 other children having been held there recently, but they weren't on the premises. Other children. Robert's face drained of color. Are you saying Wilson and his brother-in-law were running some kind of ring? Hayes finished grimly. Yes. State police are coordinating with FBI now. Wilson's laptop contained encrypted files that the tech team has partially accessed. There are images, Robert, and records, going back at least 10 years, across multiple states. Robert leaned against the wall, momentarily overwhelmed by the scope of the horror. And Lily was... We don't know the full extent of what she experienced yet, Hayes said carefully. The FBI is bringing in specialized interviewers trained to work with traumatized children. But from what we've pieced together, Wilson initially targeted Lily specifically because of her bond with Duke. He saw the dog as a challenge, thought if he could break that bond, he could break her completely. But he couldn't, Robert whispered, glancing back at his daughter and her protector through the doorway. Duke never stopped trying to save her. There's something else, Hayes continued reluctantly. Wilson had an accomplice within the department, Deputy Jackson Taylor. Robert stared in disbelief. Jack Taylor. He helped with the original search. He was the one who... Understanding dawned on his face. He was the one who cleared the hunting cabin area, said he'd searched it thoroughly. Hayes nodded grimly. We found evidence he'd been on Wilson's payroll for years. He deliberately mishandled evidence in the initial investigation, steered us away from promising leads. He's been taken into custody, facing multiple felony charges. The betrayal cut deep. Taylor had been a colleague, someone who'd offered condolences, promised to never give up, all while knowing exactly where Lily was hidden. Inside the hospital room. Sarah watched as Lily drifted into an uneasy sleep, Duke maintaining his protective position beside her. The German shepherd's own condition remained precarious. His exertions during the search had further taxed his already weakened body. Yet, he refused food and water, his focus entirely on Lily. Sarah approached the bed quietly, medical training overriding her reluctance to disturb the pair. She gently examined Duke, noting his rapid heart rate and labored breathing. "You need to rest, too," she whispered, carefully attaching a portable fluid bag to the IV catheter the hospital veterinarian had placed earlier. Duke acknowledged her with a weary blink, but didn't move from his position. When Robert returned, his face grave from Hayes's revelations, Sarah drew him aside. "Duke's not doing well," she murmured. "He's given everything he has. I'm worried he's—" "Dying?" Robert finished, the word catching in his throat. "After all this, now that she's safe, he's dying?" Sarah nodded sadly. His body was already severely compromised. The stress of the search, the emotional strain, it's too much. Robert looked at his daughter and her faithful guardian, an anguish unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed crossing his features. "She can't lose him now. Not after everything." "I've done what I can," Sarah said, indicating the IV fluids and medications. "But he needs intensive veterinary care, and he refuses to leave her side." That night, as Lily slept fitfully under sedation, Robert maintained a vigil beside her bed. Sarah had gone to arrange for additional veterinary support, promising to return by morning. In the sterile hospital room, illuminated only by the soft glow of monitoring equipment, Robert found himself speaking to Duke in hushed tones. "You did it, boy," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. "You found her. You brought her back to me." His voice broke. "But she needs you to stay now. She needs you to help her heal." Duke's eyes, though clouded with exhaustion and pain, fixed on Robert's face with unmistakable understanding. The German shepherd's tail thumped weakly against the bed. "You've been the hero of this story," Robert continued, tears tracking silently down his weathered face. "I gave up hope. The police gave up. Everyone except you." A soft voice interrupted his monologue. "He never stopped trying to escape." Robert looked up to find Lily awake, her blue eyes clear for the first time since her rescue. She stroked Duke's fur with skeletal fingers. "He tried every day," she continued, her voice stronger. "They kept him in a cage where I could see him, said they'd hurt him if I didn't do what they wanted." Her face crumpled momentarily before she regained control. "But Duke taught me to be brave. When they hurt him instead of me, he never cried out, never showed weakness." Robert's heart constricted at the implication of her words. The dog had deliberately drawn their captor's cruelty onto himself. "The day he escaped," Lily continued, "Mr. Wilson beat him really bad, said he was finally going to get rid of him. But Duke pretended to be hurt worse than he was. When they took him away in that bag, he must have gotten free somehow. He found his way to the main road," Robert told her gently. "A kind lady named Sarah found him. Duke led us back to you." Lily nodded, as if this explanation made perfect sense. "He always said he would come back with help." At Robert's confused expression, she clarified, "Not with words, but I knew what he was thinking. We understand each other." Robert didn't question this after everything that had happened. The bond between his daughter and her dog transcended normal explanation. "Is Duke going to die?" Lily asked suddenly, the question startling in its directness. Robert opened his mouth to offer reassurance, then stopped himself. After everything she'd endured, Lily deserved honesty. "He's very sick, sweetheart. He gave everything he had to find you." Lily's face remained solemn as she processed this truth. Then, with surprising strength, she pushed herself upright in the bed. "Duke," she commanded, her voice taking on a tone Robert hadn't heard in years, the voice of the confident little girl she'd been before. "You're not allowed to die. I need you. Duke's ears perked slightly at her direct address. "You promised?" Lily continued, tears welling in her eyes. "You promised we'd both get home. Both of us." The German shepherd struggled to raise his head, managing to lick her hand once before exhaustion overtook him again. But something had changed in his demeanor, a renewed determination visible even through his weakness. Robert watched this exchange with a mixture of heartbreak and wonder. In the midst of unimaginable horror, the purest bond he'd ever witnessed had not only survived, but had ultimately saved them both. Dawn painted the hospital room in pale gold light as Sarah returned, accompanied by Dr. Eliza Thornton, the region's most respected veterinary specialist. The night had been long and uncertain, with Duke's condition fluctuating between tenuous stability and alarming decline. Robert had dozed fitfully in the visitor's chair, while Lily remained awake most of the night, whispering to Duke in a language of comfort only they seemed to understand. "Good morning," Sarah said softly, setting down a carrier containing coffee and breakfast sandwiches. "This is Dr. Thornton. She's agreed to examine Duke here instead of moving him to an animal hospital." Dr. Thornton, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a practical bun, approached the bed with quiet confidence. "You must be Lily," she said, her voice warm but professional. "I'm here to help Duke, if that's all right with you." Lily studied the older woman warily before giving a slight nod. "He's very tired," she said, her voice small but protective. "And his side hurts where they kicked him." The casual mention of abuse made Robert flinch, but Dr. Thornton maintained her calm demeanor. "I'll be very gentle with him," she promised, setting down her medical bag. "Would you like to help me? Sometimes animals feel safer when someone they trust is nearby." As Dr. Thornton conducted her examination, Sarah drew Robert aside. "How did the night go?" she asked, handing him a coffee. "She talked a little," Robert replied, his voice rough from exhaustion. "About Duke, about how he protected her. Not about the rest." He glanced toward his daughter, who was carefully following Dr. Thornton's instructions on how to hold Duke still. "She's different, Sarah. There's a hardness in her eyes that no 12-year-old should have." "She survived," Sarah said simply. "That takes a kind of strength most adults don't possess." After completing her examination, Dr. Thornton motioned for Sarah and Robert to join her in the hallway, leaving a nurse to sit with Lily. "I won't sugarcoat this," the veterinarian said bluntly. "Duke's condition is critical. Severe malnutrition, multiple partially healed internal injuries, signs of repeated trauma, and extreme exhaustion. The fact that he's alive at all is frankly remarkable." Robert braced himself against the wall. "Is there anything you can do?" "I've started him on IV antibiotics, fluids, and pain management." Dr. Thornton replied, "but he needs intensive care blood transfusions, possibly surgery for internal bleeding. Even then, his chances are guarded at best. He can't be moved away from Lily." Sarah interjected. "The separation would be devastating for both of them." Dr. Thornton nodded thoughtfully. "I suspected as much. In that case, we'll need to bring the treatment to him. I'll need specialized equipment, nursing staff." She trailed off, clearly calculating logistics. "Whatever it costs," Robert said firmly, "I'll find a way to pay for it." A new voice joined their conversation. "That won't be necessary. Mr. Fletcher." They turned to find Sheriff Hayes approaching with a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "This is Matthew Caldwell, from the governor's office," Hayes explained. "The state has taken a special interest in Lily's case." Caldwell extended his hand to Robert. "Mr. Fletcher, the governor has authorized me to inform you that all medical expenses for both your daughter and her dog will be covered by the Victims' Compensation Fund. Additionally, a special allocation has been made for long-term rehabilitation and support services." Robert stared at the man, momentarily speechless. Hayes filled the awkward silence. "The case has gotten national attention overnight. The rescue of a child after 2 years in captivity, led by her loyal dog. It struck a chord." Indeed, looking past Caldwell toward the hospital entrance, Robert could see news vans gathering in the parking lot. The story was spreading, capturing public imagination with its elements of loyalty, perseverance, and unlikely rescue. "We'll need to manage the media carefully," Caldwell continued. "But for now, please focus on your daughter's recovery. The state stands ready to provide whatever resources you need." As the bureaucrat departed, Dr. Thornton wasted no time. "In that case, I'll arrange for a full veterinary ICU setup in an adjoining room. We'll create a connecting door so Duke can remain within Lily's sight while receiving treatment." Within hours, the hospital had been transformed. A team of construction workers created a pass-through between Lily's room and the adjoining one, which was quickly equipped with veterinary equipment. Dr. Thornton assembled a team of veterinary specialists and nurses who worked in shifts to provide round-the-clock care for Duke. Meanwhile, FBI investigators arrived to begin the delicate process of interviewing Lily. Dr. Spencer, the child trauma specialist, insisted on strict protocols, interviews limited to 20 minutes, a support person of Lily's choosing present at all times, immediate cessation if she showed signs of distress. To everyone's surprise, Lily requested Sarah's presence during these sessions. In addition to her father, "She saved Duke," Lily explained simply. "That means she's good." Sarah found herself in the unfamiliar role of emotional anchor as Lily began the painful process of revealing what had happened during her 2 years of captivity. The details emerged in fragments. Some days Lily would speak only about Duke. Other days she would share horrifying glimpses of her ordeal before retreating into silence. On the 4th day after the rescue, as late afternoon sunlight slanted through the hospital windows, a crucial breakthrough occurred. FBI agent Merritt, a specialist in child trafficking cases, had been showing Lily photographs of known associates of Wilson and Jenkins, hoping to identify additional suspects. "These are men who might have visited the places where you were kept," Agent Merritt explained gently. "If you recognize anyone, it could help us find the other children." Lily had been reviewing the images with detached focus until she reached a photograph of a heavy-set man with a distinctive mole beside his left eye. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. She knocked the tablet from Agent Merritt's hands and scrambled backward on the bed, drawing her knees to her chest. "Lily, you're safe," Robert assured her, moving to her side. "No one's going to hurt you." But Lily's attention had shifted to the adjoining room, where Duke lay surrounded by medical equipment, despite his weakened state. The German shepherd had raised his head at Lily's distress, his eyes fixed on the fallen tablet. "Duke knows him too," Lily whispered, trembling visibly. "He's the one who took the other girls away." Agent Merritt retrieved the tablet carefully. "This man, Edward Walters?" Lily nodded, her eyes never leaving Duke. "He came every few months. Said he was quality control." Her voice took on a mechanical quality, as if reciting something she'd heard. "He checked us to make sure we were being kept right, then took some girls to their permanent placements. They never came back." The room fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. Walters was a mid-level banking executive from Richmond with no previous criminal record, and according to Lily, he was a key figure in a trafficking network that extended far beyond Wilson and Jenkins. "Lily," Agent Merritt said carefully, "the other girls who were with you recently, do you remember their names? Mia, Tanya, and Kira." Lily replied without hesitation. "Walters took them 3 days before Duke escaped. He said they were going overseas." Her face crumpled suddenly. "I was supposed to go too, but Mr. Wilson said I wasn't ready yet, that I was still too defiant." Sarah felt physically ill at the casual way Lily described what was clearly a human trafficking operation. Robert had gone deathly pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Do you know where Walters might have taken them?" Agent Merritt pressed gently. Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. "He talked about a boat and numbers. 228, maybe a dock number." Agent Merritt was already texting information to her team. "This is extremely helpful. Lily, you're being incredibly brave." "Duke was braver," Lily said, her gaze returning to her faithful guardian. "He bit Walters once when he tried to touch me. That's when they started keeping him in the cage." In the adjoining room, despite his critical condition, Duke maintained his vigilant watch over Lily. The monitors attached to him showed elevated heart rate and blood pressure even in his weakened state. The memory of the threat had triggered his protective instincts. "Dr." Thornton moved swiftly to adjust his medication. "He's still trying to protect her," she murmured to Sarah. "Even now." That evening, after Lily had finally fallen asleep under mild sedation, Robert and Sarah joined Sheriff Hayes and Agent Merritt in the hospital's small conference room. The wall-mounted television showed breaking news coverage of raids at multiple locations along the eastern seaboard. Lily's information had sparked a coordinated law enforcement operation targeting Walters and his associates. "We've identified a yacht registered to one of Walters' shell companies docked at berth 228 in Norfolk," Agent Merritt reported. "Tactical teams are moving in now. We believe at least 7 children may be aboard, including the 3 Lily mentioned." Hayes shook his head in disbelief. "How deep does this go?" "We're still mapping the network," Merritt replied grimly. "But based on financial records and communications we've recovered from Wilson's devices, we're looking at an operation spanning at least 5 states, possibly with international connections. And Lily was going to be—" Robert couldn't finish the sentence. "She was lucky," Merritt said softly. as horrible as her ordeal was. It appears Wilson developed an unusual fixation on breaking her spirit completely before transferring her. His obsession with defeating her bond with Duke may have inadvertently saved her from an even worse fate. The irony was almost unbearable. The very cruelty that had caused such suffering had also prevented Lily from disappearing into a trafficking network where she might never have been found. Wilson's refusing to cooperate, Hayes added. But Jenkins is talking, trying to cut a deal. Says he was just following orders, claims he didn't know the full extent of the operation. Will Lily have to testify? Sarah asked, dreading the answer. We're doing everything possible to avoid that. Merritt assured them. The physical evidence is substantial, and with Jenkins' testimony plus the electronic records, we should be able to build cases without putting Lily through a trial. As the discussion continued, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Thornton. "Duke critical. Come quickly." Sarah and Robert rushed back to the hospital rooms, finding the veterinary team in full emergency mode. Duke had suffered a cardiac event, his weakened body finally reaching its limits. Dr. Thornton was performing chest compressions while a technician administered emergency medications. "What happened?" Sarah demanded, medical training kicking in as she joined the team. Arrhythmia progressing to cardiac arrest. Dr. Thornton replied tersely, "He's been hanging on by sheer willpower, but his body's giving out." Robert stood frozen in the doorway, watching the desperate efforts to save his daughter's faithful protector. The monitors showed erratic vital signs, then flatlined with an ominous, continuous tone. "No pulse," a technician reported. "BP undetectable." Dr. Thornton continued compressions. "Push one more epi, then we'll call it if there's no response." "Dad," Lily's voice came from behind Robert. She stood in the connecting doorway, awakened by the commotion. "What's happening to Duke?" Robert turned, instinctively trying to shield her from the scene. "Sweetheart, the doctors are helping him. Let's go back to your room." But Lily pushed past him, her frail body moving with surprising determination. "Duke!" she cried, reaching the bedside where the medical team worked frantically. "Dr." Thornton hesitated, clearly torn between continuing resuscitation efforts and protecting the child from trauma. "Lily, honey, we're doing everything we can. He's not leaving me," Lily stated with absolute conviction. She placed her hand on Duke's head, leaning close to his ear. "You promised," she whispered fiercely. "You promised we'd both go home." What happened next would later be described by the medical team with clinical terms like spontaneous return of circulation and autonomic nervous system response. But for those in the room, it felt like something else entirely. Duke's monitor emitted a single beep, then another. A technician gasped, "I've got a pulse." Lily showed no surprise, continuing to stroke Duke's head as his vital signs gradually stabilized. "He just needed to know I was here," she said simply. "He won't leave me now." Dr. Thornton exchanged amazed glances with her team as Duke's condition improbably stabilized. "I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 40 years, she murmured to Sarah, "and I've never seen anything quite like this bond." Robert watched his daughter with the faithful dog who had saved her, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. In this moment of crisis and miracle, he glimpsed something profound about the road ahead. Recovery would be neither quick nor easy, but Lily possessed a strength that had survived the darkest of circumstances. And Duke, against all medical odds, was still fighting to stay by her side. 1 year later, the Fletcher home buzzed with quiet activity as Sarah arranged fresh-cut flowers in a vase while Robert adjusted a welcome home banner in the living room. The modest suburban house had undergone significant renovations over the past months, walls painted in bright colors chosen by Lily, new furniture selected for comfort rather than style, and a specially designed ramp alongside the porch steps. "Is everything ready?" Robert asked, stepping back to examine his handiwork. Gray had crept further into his hair over the past year, but the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by something Sarah recognized as hard-won peace. "As ready as it can be," she replied, smoothing a wrinkle from the tablecloth. "Dr. Spencer said to keep it low-key, no surprises. No crowds." The doorbell rang, and Robert opened it to find Frank Miller standing on the porch, holding a wrapped package. "Thought I'd drop this off before the welcome party," the former K-9 handler said, handing over the gift. "Custom made, just like we discussed." Inside the box was a specialized service dog vest, emblazoned with official-looking patches and built to accommodate Duke's now permanent limp. The top patch read, "Certified Hero," in bold letters, with "Emotional Support Animal" beneath it. "It's perfect." "Frank," Robert said, voice thick with emotion. "She'll love it." Frank nodded, understanding in his weathered face. "He earned it. That dog rewrote the rule book on loyalty." He glanced at his watch. "I'll come back later with the others. Wanted to give Lily some time to settle in first." As Frank departed, Sarah slipped her hand into Robert's. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past year, beginning as allies in Lily's recovery and slowly deepening into something neither had expected to find again. Sarah had sold her practice in Charlottesville, accepting a position at Millridge Animal Hospital to remain close to the Fletchers. "Nervous?" she asked, feeling the slight tremor in his fingers. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if she's not ready? What if the house doesn't feel safe enough? What if—" Sarah silenced his spiral with a gentle squeeze. "She's ready. Dr. Spencer wouldn't have recommended discharge if she wasn't. And this home is more secure than Fort Knox thanks to Hayes's security upgrades." Indeed. The house now boasted a state-of-the-art security system, donated by a company that had followed Lily's story in the news. The media sensation surrounding the case had gradually faded, but not before generating substantial public support, financial donations, letters of encouragement, and even scholarship offers for Lily's future education. The sound of tires on the driveway announced their arrival. Robert took a deep breath, steadying himself before opening the front door. Outside, Dr. Spencer helped Lily from the car while a hospital aide carefully assisted Duke. The German shepherd's once emaciated frame had filled out with proper nutrition, though he would always bear the physical scars of his ordeal. He wore a simple support harness that helped compensate for his weakened hind leg, moving with deliberate dignity as he maintained his position at Lily's side. Lily herself stood taller than she had a year ago, her blonde hair grown out into a neat bob, her frame still thin but no longer skeletal. At 13, she carried herself with a peculiar mixture of childlike vulnerability and old-soul wisdom that both broke and mended Robert's heart each time he saw her. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said softly, fighting to keep his voice steady. Lily paused at the threshold, one hand resting on Duke's head, surveying the home she hadn't seen in 3 years. Her expression remained guarded. A defense mechanism Dr. Spencer had explained might never fully disappear, but her blue eyes softened at the sight of the banner and flowers. "You painted the walls yellow," she observed, her voice stronger than it had been in the hospital, but still quieter than the boisterous 10-year-old Robert remembered. "Your favorite color," he confirmed. Sarah helped pick the shade. Not too bright, not too pale. Lily's gaze shifted to Sarah, who had become a constant in her recovery. The relationship had developed gradually, Sarah joining therapy sessions, bringing updates on Duke's rehabilitation, simply being present without demands or expectations. "It's nice," Lily decided, taking a tentative step inside. Duke moved with her, his vigilance never wavering despite the familiar surroundings. Dr. Spencer had explained that the dog's protective behavior might actually intensify in new environments, a response to the trauma they had shared. "Would you like to see your room?" Robert asked. "We kept some of your old things, but you can choose new decorations too, if you'd prefer." Lily nodded, following him up the stairs with Duke matching her pace exactly. Sarah and Dr. Spencer remained downstairs, giving father and daughter space for this important moment. The bedroom had been completely redecorated, fresh paint, new furniture, nothing that might trigger memories of the life before her abduction. But on the nightstand sat Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat Lily had slept with since she was 4. Robert had kept it in his own room during her absence, a talisman of hope he couldn't bear to put away. Lily approached the nightstand slowly, picking up the worn, stuffed animal with careful hands. "You kept him," she whispered. "Of course I did," Robert replied, watching from the doorway. "Everything of yours was kept. Nothing thrown away." Something in his tone made Lily look up sharply. "Mom's things, too." The question revealed one of the many conversations still ahead of them. Caroline had not returned after the divorce, even after Lily's rescue made national news. Her brief phone call of congratulations had been followed by silence, guilt, shame, or simple inability to face the daughter she had given up on finding. Robert couldn't say. "Yes," he answered honestly. "Mom's things are in storage. She's living in Arizona now." Lily nodded, absorbing this information without visible reaction. Dr. Spencer had warned that emotional responses might be delayed or muted, a protective mechanism developed during captivity when showing feelings often triggered punishment. Duke nudged Lily's hand gently, sensing the emotional undercurrent. She automatically stroked his head, the gesture so practiced it seemed like an extension of her own movement. "Will Sarah be staying?" Lily asked, changing the subject with the directness that had become characteristic since her rescue. "She has her own apartment in town," Robert explained carefully. "But she'll be here often. If that's okay with you." Lily considered this, her face serious. "She makes you smile. You didn't smile before?" The simple observation carried the weight of permission. Robert swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yes, she does." Downstairs, the doorbell rang again. Lily tensed immediately, and Duke shifted to alert posture. "It's okay," Robert assured her quickly. "Just Sheriff Hayes and a few others who helped find you. They wanted to welcome you home, but if it's too much, they can come another day." Lily hesitated, then squared her shoulders in a gesture that reminded Robert painfully of her mother. Duke and I can handle it, she decided, but not too long. We get tired easily still. As they descended the stairs, Duke maintaining perfect position beside Lily, Robert watched his daughter greet each visitor with careful composure. Sheriff Hayes, with his gruff kindness, Frank Miller, who had helped train Duke originally, Dr. Thornton, who had saved Duke's life, and Agent Merritt, whose team had dismantled the trafficking network, rescuing 17 children in total. The gathering remained quiet and brief, as promised. Throughout, Lily maintained physical contact with Duke, drawing strength from his unwavering presence. When the visitors departed, leaving only Robert, Sarah, and Dr. Spencer, Lily finally showed signs of fatigue. "Time for rest," Dr. Spencer suggested gently. "Remember, your routine settling in takes energy." Lily nodded, clearly relieved at the permission to retreat. As she headed toward the stairs with Duke, she paused, turning back to Robert and Sarah. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up." After Lily and Duke had settled in her room, Dr. Spencer prepared to leave, offering final guidance to Robert and Sarah. "There will be good days and difficult days," she reminded them. "The trauma doesn't disappear, she learns to carry it differently." "And Duke?" Sarah asked. "The veterinary team is still concerned about his heart." Dr. Spencer smiled slightly. "In my professional opinion, that dog will live exactly as long as Lily needs him to. Some bonds transcend medical prognosis." As the doctor departed, Robert and Sarah stood together in the quiet living room, the welcome home banner gently shifting in the breeze from an open window. "We made it," Robert said softly, almost disbelieving. "She's home." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, her voice equally quiet. "Now the real journey begins." Upstairs, Lily lay on her bed with Duke curled protectively beside her, his head resting on her lap. Outside her window, sunlight filtered through new curtains, casting dappled patterns across the floor. For the first time in 3 years, they were truly safe together, as they had promised each other in the darkest moments of their shared captivity. "We did it, Duke," Lily whispered, stroking his graying muzzle. "We found our way home." Duke's tail thumped gently against the bed in quiet agreement, his faithful eyes never leaving her face. The journey wasn't over, may never truly be over, but they would face whatever came next the same way they had survived the unimaginable together. When we share the story of Lily and Duke, we're reminded of what truly matters in this life. It speaks to our deepest fears, the safety of our children and grandchildren in an increasingly dangerous world, but also to our greatest hopes. Duke's unwavering loyalty in the face of cruelty reminds us of the companions who've stood by us through our own darkest days. The German shepherd who crawled across a road in a garbage bag, fighting death itself to save his young owner, embodies the kind of determination many of us needed when facing life's unexpected trials. Robert's refusal to give up, even when everyone told him to move on, mirrors the stubborn perseverance that defined our generation. We understand that love doesn't surrender to odds or statistics. Sarah's unexpected second chance at purpose shows us it's never too late to find meaning, even after devastating loss. In times when the evening news makes us question humanity's goodness, this story restores our faith. It reminds us that evil may have its moment, but loyalty Love and courage ultimately prevail. Some bonds truly are unbreakable, and that's something worth believing in, no matter our age.